The Arizona desert was unusually quiet that night. No cars passed on the old highway near Daniel Carter's small wooden cabin, and even the coyotes seemed silent. The moon hung low in the sky, pale and lonely, casting silver light across the empty sand and dry bushes. Daniel had just finished washing his single plate and cup, part of the same lonely routine he followed every evening. Living alone for 3 years had taught him how to enjoy silence, but that night, the silence felt heavier than usual. He was about to turn off the lamp when a sound cut through the stillness. A knock. At first, Daniel thought it was his imagination. Nobody ever came out here after dark. The nearest town was 40 minutes away, and travelers avoided this road once the sun went down. He stood still, listening. Then he heard it again, 3 slow knocks on the wooden door. His heart began to pound. Daniel walked quietly to the door and looked through the small window. In the dim light, he saw the shape of a person. Smaller than him. A woman, maybe. His hand reached for the door handle, then paused. His mind filled with warning thoughts. It could be dangerous. This was the desert. People didn't just show up without a reason. He opened the door just enough to see her face. A young native Apache woman stood on his porch. Her dark hair was loose and wind-tangled. Dust covered the bottom of her long skirt, and her thin jacket did little to protect her from the cold desert night. Her eyes were dark and deep, filled with exhaustion and quiet fear. She lifted her hands slowly, in a peaceful gesture. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I just need a place to stay for one night." Daniel stood frozen. Her words were simple, but they carried the sound of desperation. He studied her face, looking for lies, for danger, for something that didn't feel right. But all he saw was a woman who looked like she had been walking for far too long, in a world that had given her no rest. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head. "No. Just tired." A cold wind blew across the porch, making her pull her jacket tighter. Daniel noticed her hands trembling, and he could tell it was not only from the cold. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she added quietly. Daniel looked past her into the empty darkness of the desert road. No car lights. No houses. Nothing but open land and night. Leaving her out there didn't feel right. Not as a man. Not as a human being. Finally, he stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in," he said. "It's not much, but it's warm." For a moment, she hesitated, as if she did not fully believe him. Then she stepped inside slowly, like someone entering a world she was not sure would stay safe. As Daniel closed the door behind her, he had no idea that this single choice, this simple act of kindness, would shape the rest of his life. That night, the desert brought him a stranger. And fate quietly walked in with her. The cabin smelled of burning wood and old pine as Daniel led the woman inside. The door closed with a soft click behind her, shutting out the desert wind and the endless darkness beyond. For a second, she just stood there, unsure, as if she were afraid the warmth might disappear if she moved too suddenly. Daniel noticed how thin her jacket was and how her shoulders were tight with cold and exhaustion. "Sit by the fire," he said gently, pointing to the small chair near the fireplace. She nodded and sat down carefully, holding her hands close to the flames. Daniel walked to the tiny kitchen corner and pulled out a saucepan. He filled it with water and lit the gas stove. While waiting, he opened a cabinet and found a can of soup and a small loaf of bread. It wasn't much, but it was all he could offer. When the soup was ready, he poured it into a wooden bowl and handed it to her. Her fingers touched the bowl like it might vanish if she didn't hold it tightly. The steam rose into her face, and she breathed in deeply, like it was the most beautiful smell in the world. "Thank you," she whispered. Daniel nodded and sat across from her with his own bowl. He waited, unsure what to say. He didn't want to scare her with questions. She took her first spoonful very slowly. "My name is Aiyana," she finally said. "I'm Daniel," he replied. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, louder than the fire, stronger than the silence. Aiyana ate quietly, but Daniel noticed the way her eyes moved, always aware of her surroundings. Every creak of the cabin made her look up. It was clear she had learned not to feel safe easily. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to," Daniel said after a few minutes. "You can just rest tonight." She looked at him, surprised, as if she had expected questions, not kindness. "I've been walking for 3 days," she admitted. "My feet don't feel like they belong to me anymore." Daniel frowned. 3 days in the desert could kill a person. "Where were you going?" he asked softly. She hesitated. "I don't know," she said honestly. I just knew I couldn't go back." Her words carried pain, deep and personal. Daniel wondered what kind of place she had escaped from, and what kind of past followed her in the dark. But he didn't push. When she finished eating, color slowly returned to her face. Daniel poured her a cup of water and watched her drink it as if every drop mattered. "Do you have family?" he asked gently. She lowered her eyes. "Not anymore." The way she said it told him everything. Whatever had happened, it had taken everything from her. Daniel stood up and grabbed a thick blanket from the small closet. He placed it carefully over her shoulders. "You're safe here tonight," he said. "No one is coming for you." Aiyana's lips trembled slightly at his words. She looked at him like no one ever had before. Not with fear, but with hope. And in that moment, Daniel felt something he had not felt in years, that his cabin was no longer empty. The wind began to howl sometime after midnight. At first, it was only a low whistle through the cracks of the cabin walls. Daniel lay awake on his narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the fire slowly die down in the other room. He could not sleep. His thoughts kept returning to the woman resting by his fire. A stranger had walked into his life just hours earlier, and yet the cabin already felt different, full in a way it hadn't for a long time. Then thunder rolled through the desert like a warning. Aiyana stirred at the sound and pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. She had tried to sleep in the chair, refusing Daniel's bed, so he had put extra pillows and blankets on the floor near the fire for her. When the second clap of thunder hit, louder than the first, she sat up suddenly, her breath sharp and quick. Daniel rushed out of the bedroom and into the main room. "I'm sorry," he said. "The storms come fast out here." Lightning flashed through the small window and filled the cabin with bright white light for just a second. In that moment, Daniel saw fear clearly on her face, not just fear of the storm, but something deeper, older. Another boom of thunder hit, and she flinched hard. "You don't have to sit there," Daniel said. "You can move closer to the fire." She hesitated, then slowly crawled closer to where the flames danced behind the metal grate. The warmth wrapped around her like invisible arms, but her hands still shook. When the rain started, it poured like the sky had cracked open. Water hammered the roof. In heavy drops, loud and wild. The wind pushed against the walls of the cabin, making old boards creak and moan. It sounded like the desert itself was alive and angry. The front window suddenly rattled. Daniel crossed the room quickly and pressed his hand against the glass just as a strong gust shook it hard in its frame. "It's okay," he said to Aiyana, though he wasn't sure she believed it. "This place is stronger than it looks." She nodded but did not speak. Instead, she hugged the blanket tightly and closed her eyes, trying to block out the noise. The storm seemed to grow louder with every passing second, like it was testing the cabin, testing them. Then lightning struck so close that the ground vibrated beneath them. Aiyana cried out softly and reached forward without thinking. Her hand caught Daniel's wrist. Both of them froze. The touch was sudden, unexpected, and strangely grounding. Daniel didn't pull away. Instead, he sat beside her on the floor, close enough that she could feel his presence but not too close to scare her. "You're not alone," he said quietly. She opened her eyes and slowly released her grip, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It's okay," he replied. "Really?" The storm continued outside, but something inside the cabin shifted. The air no longer felt empty. It felt shared. Aiyana took a shaky breath. "When I was a child," she said softly, "storms meant running." Daniel didn't ask from where. He waited. "And sometimes," she continued, "running still wasn't enough." Her voice broke in the middle of the sentence. Daniel stared at the fire, understanding more than she said. They sat in silence after that, not because there was nothing to say, but because some things were too heavy for words. Outside, the desert raged. Inside, two lonely souls found shelter, not just from the storm, but from the world. And neither of them realized yet that this night was stitching their lives together, thread by fragile thread. The storm passed sometime before dawn, leaving the desert quiet and washed clean. When Daniel finally opened his eyes, soft golden light was spilling through the window and across the wooden floor. The air smelled fresh, like wet sand and pine. For a moment, he forgot about the night before and the stranger sleeping just a few feet away. Then he remembered. He sat up slowly and looked toward the fireplace. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, and beside it, wrapped in his thick blanket, Aiyana slept peacefully on the floor. Her dark hair had fallen across her face, and she looked younger somehow, softer, no longer like someone running, but someone resting. Daniel watched her for a second longer than he should have. He felt strange, protective, like the cabin wasn't just his anymore. Quietly, he stood and walked into the kitchen corner. He poured coffee grounds into the old coffee maker and filled it with water. Soon, the sound of bubbling and the smell of fresh coffee filled the air, warm and comforting. He sliced some bread and placed it on a pan to toast. The simple routine made the morning feel normal, and yet nothing about this morning felt normal at all. As if sensing him, Aiyana slowly opened her eyes. For a second, fear flickered across her face, until she remembered where she was. Then her shoulders relaxed. "Good morning," Daniel said softly. She sat up, careful not to drop the blanket. "Good morning," she replied, her voice sleepy but calm. The sunlight caught her face, and Daniel noticed small details he hadn't seen in the firelight, faint freckles, the curve of her cheek, the quiet strength in her eyes. She wasn't just beautiful, she looked real. "Did you sleep okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Better than I have in a long time." He handed her a steaming mug of coffee. She wrapped her hands around it and inhaled the smell like it was new to her. "Thank you," she said again. It seemed like the only word she had. They sat together at the small table, eating warm bread in comfortable silence. Outside, rainwater sparkled on the sand like hidden glass. "I should probably go," Aiyana said suddenly. The words hit Daniel harder than he expected. She looked toward the door, but did not move yet. Daniel's mouth opened before his brain could stop it. "You don't have to," he said. She turned to him, surprised. "I mean," he added quickly, "you can stay here for a while if you need to. This place, it's quiet. Safe." Her fingers tightened around her cup. "You barely know me," she said. "That's true," he admitted. "But I know you're tired. And I know you're not dangerous." She studied his face, as if trying to read something hidden inside it. "And what if I bring trouble with me?" she asked. "Then we face it together," he answered simply. The honesty in his voice seemed to reach her. Her eyes softened. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then she whispered, "No one has said that to me before." Daniel felt something warm spread through his chest, not fire, not coffee. Hope. Outside, the desert stretched wide and empty. Inside, two strangers stood at the edge of something new. Neither of them knew what would come next. But neither of them wanted this moment to end. The desert sun climbed higher into the sky as they sat quietly at the small table. Daniel washed the dishes while Aiyana studied a faded photograph pinned to the wall. It showed Daniel beside an older man in a work uniform, both of them smiling. "Your father?" she asked gently. Daniel nodded. "He passed away 2 years ago. This cabin was his dream. I just stayed in it." "I'm sorry," she said softly. He shrugged in a quiet way. "You learn to live with empty places." Her eyes lowered at those words. After a moment, she spoke again, her voice careful, as if each word weighed something. "Daniel, you asked last night about my family." He stopped wiping the counter and turned toward her. "You don't have to. I want to," she said. He sat down across from her and waited. She folded her hands in front of her. "I grew up in a small Apache community in New Mexico. My grandmother raised me. She taught me our songs, our stories, how to listen to the mountains and the wind." A small smile touched her lips for the first time as she spoke of that place. "But then," she continued, and her voice hardened, "things changed. The land was sold. People were pushed out. What was once home became someone else's business." Daniel listened, his hands tight in his lap. "My grandmother refused to leave. She said the land was her heart. When she died, I stayed alone in a place that no longer wanted me." Her eyes glistened. "I worked in nearby towns. Some people were kind, some were not. I kept moving, thinking I would find somewhere that felt right again. But everywhere felt temporary, like I didn't belong to the world anymore." Daniel felt a strange ache in his chest. "What happened this time?" he asked gently. She swallowed. "I trusted the wrong people. Thought I had found a new start. Instead, I found fear." She did not give details, she didn't need to. "I ran in the night," she said quietly. "With nothing but that bag you saw. I walked until my feet burned, until my hands went numb. When I saw your cabin, I wasn't even sure you would open the door." Daniel leaned forward. "I'm glad you knocked," he said. Her eyes lifted to his. "That's the first kind thing anyone has said to me in a long time." Silence settled around them again, this time warmer than before. Daniel stood and walked to the window. "You know," he said, "I didn't plan on staying here forever. But somehow, I ended up hiding in this cabin too." She looked at him. "From what?" she asked. "From life," he admitted. "From trying again. From caring." She smiled sadly. "Maybe we both ran." Daniel turned back to her. "Then maybe," he said, "we both stopped running last night." Her breath caught at his words. Neither of them knew what their future would hold. But for the first time, it didn't feel empty. It felt possible. The afternoon sun hung low over the desert, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange. Aiyana stood near the cabin door with her small bag resting at her feet. Everything she owned was inside it. A few clothes, a folded photograph from her childhood, and the quiet fear that had followed her across the desert. Daniel watched her from the wooden table, pretending to fix a loose nail that didn't really need fixing. "You really don't have to go right now," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. She tied the strap of her bag around her shoulder. "I've stayed long enough. You've already given more than you should to a stranger." Daniel stood. "You're not a stranger anymore," he replied. The words surprised even him. Aiyana's eyes shimmered, but she forced a small smile. "That's what scares me." She reached for the door, then paused. "What if I bring pain here?" she whispered. "What if whatever I escaped from finds me?" Daniel took a step closer. "Then you won't face it alone." She turned toward him fully now. "You don't understand. Every place I stop becomes dangerous. People get hurt, or they leave." Daniel swallowed. "Maybe," he said, "you just haven't stopped in the right place yet." Silence stretched between them like a fragile bridge. Aiyana closed her eyes. All her life, she had been leaving before she could be left. Before anyone could matter. Before anything could break. And now here was a man offering her something she hadn't known how to ask for. Without opening her eyes, she asked, "Why would you do this for me?" Daniel thought for a moment. "Because I know what it feels like to wake up every day pretending you don't need anyone," he said. "And because this place was empty before you walked in." Her throat tightened. Slowly, she untied the strap of her bag. The door creaked as desert wind pushed against it. But she did not open it. Instead, she set her bag down. Daniel did not smile. He did not cheer. He simply breathed again. "I'll stay," she whispered. "Not forever, just for now." Daniel nodded like it was the greatest promise he had ever been given. "That's enough," he said. That evening, they cooked together. It was awkward at first, two people learning how to move in the same small space. But slowly, laughter appeared. Quiet, unexpected laughter that filled the cabin like music. After dinner, they sat on the porch. The desert glowed beneath the sky as stars began to appear, one by one. "This place is beautiful," she said. Daniel looked at her, not the sky. "It is now," he replied. She laughed softly, embarrassed. And for the first time in years, Aiyana did not feel like she was waiting to leave. She felt like she had arrived. Outside, the desert was the same. Inside, everything had changed. She had made a choice. And so had he. Days began to pass in a way that felt new to both of them. The desert sun rose each morning over the cabin just as it always had, but now something was different. The light didn't fall on empty rooms anymore. It fell on 2 cups on the table, on shared silence, on small smiles that meant more than words. Aiyana woke early, as she always had. She swept the cabin floor and opened the windows to let in the morning air. Daniel noticed how she treated the small space with respect, like it was more than a shelter. It was becoming a home. In return, Daniel showed her around the land. He took her to a dry riverbed where smooth stones told old stories. He walked with her through cactus fields glowing with quiet life. At night, they sat outside and watched stars spill across the sky like silver dust. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't. Both felt right. Daniel learned that Aiyana loved simple things. The sound of wind through tall grass, warm tea at night, faded books with soft pages. Aiyana learned that Daniel liked old music, broken tools he promised to fix one day, and the comfort of routine. One evening, they ate dinner on the porch, the air warm and still. "You grew roots here," she said. He smiled faintly. "Or maybe I stopped growing them." She considered this. "Maybe we were both waiting," she said. "For what?" he asked. "For life to begin again." Her words stayed with him long after she went inside. But happiness does not walk alone. One afternoon, Daniel returned from town quiet and uneasy. Aiyana noticed immediately. What happened? She asked. He hesitated. Someone at the store asked about you. Her face drained of color. What did you say? That your family, he replied. She looked at him in disbelief. And something deeper than fear passed through her eyes. Daniel, you don't know who might be looking for me. He stepped closer. Then stay here. We'll handle whatever comes. Her voice shook. What if I don't want you pulled into my past? Daniel touched her hand. You're already in mine. She pulled away gently. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, staring into darkness. The past had a way of creeping back when things felt safe. Daniel joined her silently and placed a blanket around her shoulders. I'm not leaving, he said. Not because of fear, not because of you. Tears slipped down her cheek. I'm not used to someone staying, she whispered. He looked into her eyes. Then maybe it's time you were. The desert did not answer. But her heart began to. And for the first time since she was a child, Aiyana slept without dreams of running. Autumn arrived quietly across the desert. The air turned cooler, and long shadows stretched across the sand each evening. Weeks had passed since Aiyana chose to stay, and in that time, something beautiful had grown between her and Daniel. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was soft, steady, real. One evening, Daniel asked her to walk with him to a place he had never shown anyone before. They climbed a narrow desert path up a rocky hill behind the cabin. From the top, the land stretched out in every direction like an endless painting of gold and red. The sun was slowly sinking, painting the sky with fire. This is where I come when I need to think, Daniel said. Aiyana edged closer to him, pulled by the quiet power of the place. I used to wish for something I couldn't name, she whispered. Out here, I think I finally know what it was. Daniel turned to her. The sunset glowed in her eyes. He took a shaky breath. I don't want you to ever leave, he said. I don't want this to be temporary. I want a life with you. Here, with me. Silence fell between them like a held breath. Aiyana's heart raced. For so long, she had believed that nothing lasted. Homes disappeared. People left. Promises broke. She looked out at the desert, wide, open, honest. Then she looked back at Daniel. I came here asking for one night, she said softly. You gave me a future. Tears filled her eyes as she stepped closer. I don't know how to promise forever, she admitted. But I can promise today. And tomorrow. And every step I'm brave enough to take with you. Daniel reached for her hands, grounding and warm. That's all I'm asking, he said. They stood in silence as the sun fell beyond the earth. A promise formed between them without words. Months later, they were married in a simple ceremony behind the cabin. No guests, no music, just wind, sky, and vows spoken softly. Daniel wore his father's old jacket. Aiyana wore a simple white dress with a handmade Apache bracelet resting against her wrist, a piece of her past carried into her future. When Daniel spoke his vows, his voice shook. I was lost long before you arrived. You didn't find me, you brought me back. Aiyana's tears fell freely. And you, she said, did not save me. You stood beside me while I saved myself. They kissed under an endless sky. Not as a rescue, but as equals. Years later, people would say the desert cabin glowed with warmth. Not because of the fire inside, but because love had finally found its way there. And the Apache woman who asked for one night became his wife for a lifetime.